Hello everyone, welcome to the IRIS webinar. My name is Pierrick Delez, I'm Marketing Director at IRIS. I'm welcoming you from my home office in Brussels, Belgium. Today's topic is AP capture automation with a focus on PO matching. I'm lucky to have two colleagues, I should say two experts with me. Joe Siegel joining from Florida and Mike Dici joining from Illinois. First, some practicalities. We are using Livestorm, that's a webinar tool. The webinar will be approximately 45 minutes, approximately. You can ask your questions via the question tab on the right-hand side of your screen. And there will be a Q&A session after the demo. If a question is worth being asked during the presentation, I will interrupt my colleagues to ask that question. Also, the recording of the webinar and the slide deck will be shared with you after the session. So don't need to take screenshots. It will be shared, everything will be shared with you and made available for you. I think we are all set. So Joe and Mike, the floor is yours. Can you first introduce yourselves and maybe starting with you, Mike?
Thanks, Pierre. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Dici. I'm really excited to be with everyone on this call. It's really cool. We've gathered a lot of people from all over the world for this. I have been doing document management and capture for 12 to 15 years as part of my career with IRIS, but also the 15 years I was with Canon before that. So since IRIS is a Canon company, I guess that gives me 20 years with Canon. But of all the solutions that I've worked with, especially being part of the copy industry, which there was a lot, I really like the fact that capture and DM really gives you that consulting approach from a reshaping a business process. And so today I know we're focused on AP and specifically PO matching and all the variations that go with that. So I look forward to sharing a demo of that with you guys today. But first, Joe's gonna start you off with something else. Joe?
Okay, thanks, Mike. And thank you all for joining today. I'm Joe Siegel. I'm in my 13th year developing partner relationships for IRIS here in the US. My career has always been in the information and technology field with a focus on document-related software, as far back as when using OCR required identifying which of the few recognizable fonts were to be read. So maybe there's even some of you who remember the terms OCR-A and OCR-B. And many years ago, during a project for McDonnell Douglas, I heard that if printed out, the documentation for the MD-80 aircraft would not fit inside the airplane and would weigh more than the airplane. So the challenges of merging computer technology, which is relatively recent in human experience, with document usage that goes back to when they were carved on stone tablets, has always interested me. IRIS has been a worldwide leader in document understanding technologies for over 30 years. Following years of success as a publicly traded company, we joined Canon Group 7 years ago. Our broad portfolio of products and technologies ranges from licensable core technologies such as our IDRS OCR engine, used by companies including Adobe, Canon, and HP, to full process automation solutions. And today we're focusing on our IRIS Extract solution package accounts payable application. So, and by the way, you see these periods, these dots in IRIS. IRIS is actually an acronym standing for Image Recognition Integrated System. If you don't already know that, you have already learned something by attending today's webinar. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint a little bit quickly so that we have ample time for our demo today. And for today's webinar, we are assuming that you, our audience, has some familiarity with the basic features and capabilities of our Iris Extract solution package accounts payable. That brings true financial returns, and by that we mean savings that are measurable, looking at improvements in before and after AP department metrics. These include the ability to take quick pay discounts, minimizing late payments, eliminating duplicate payments, and greatly increasing the number of invoices processed per employee. Better analysis leads to other savings, such as consolidation of suppliers or finding the best suppliers for certain items. Now, we do have information on our website where you can find an overview of our accounts payable application. And on our stories page, you will find numerous examples of how businesses and organizations have benefited from automating their AP and other processes, such as this story from Wiestech, an auto industry manufacturer. Various industry sources publish high cost figures for invoice processing, usually between $12 and $30. Some firms narrow this gap to between $12 and $15. Some place it as high as $40 or higher. Yet even such high average costs hide the disproportionate cost of exception processing. By addressing the disproportionately high cost of processing exceptions, even companies who have already taken some steps toward digitization can achieve greater savings now with enhanced process automation. Today, we will share with you some statistics on the importance of PO matching and show other types of exceptions. So these next slides show data from an independent survey. We have highlighted findings showing how important addressing PO matching can be. And on this slide, we see that respondents say nearly a third of incoming PO-related invoices do have an exception. According to the survey respondents, that 1/3 of exceptions with PO-related invoices cause 32% of late payments. So you see that direct relationship between exceptions and late payments. Late payment elimination is one example of true hard dollar savings. Late fees vary, commonly 1.5%, which hurts operating margins. This is one of those AP department metrics that is measurable as a before and after picture result of process automation. And if these mismatches cause late payments by being later than 30 or 60 days, then of course the company has also already lost any available quick pay discounts, typically 2%, as in 210 net 30. So on a single transaction, this could mean a 3.5% swing. Aggregated, these costs really add up, negatively impacting bottom line profits. These PO mismatches cause 36% of all supplier calls. So, every phone call with a supplier by an accounts payable department team member is costly. And we feel that such staff time can be much better spent on optimizing supplier relationships. This survey was conducted with large-sized companies, though a company with smaller volumes of invoices would see similar, very significant reduction in direct labor costs. In fact, these savings in direct labor costs are the major item looked at when people analyze expected return on investment, ROI, when justifying AP automation, just as with other process automation investments. Iris Extract Solution Package Accounts Payable includes built-in logic for the matching and calculating line item prices and quantities. And you see this is a major issue for companies today. So we're going to take a look at this during our demo. Now, people tend to think of Iris document understanding and process to content applications generally as OCRing, simply reading what is on the document image. And that's of course true, we do that. But very importantly, we can also add information to the metadata that is exported with the image that is not on the image itself. Some non-AP examples include leveraging master data from back-end lines of business software, calculating values, applying formulas, database lookups relating one field to another, such as in healthcare, using a patient ID number to associate with their doctor's provider ID number, or in legal, associating client ID number to the attorney within a law firm handling their case, or other information in the record like a zip code for routing to the correct next step in the workflow, or system data such as when or by whom the document was processed. Now, within accounts payable, a common example of adding information not existing on the invoice is to identify the cost center or department who ordered the items, which streamlines the approval workflow. Another attractive feature is the ability to add GL codes, a big advantage of our automated approach, and one that you're going to see in the demo. And again, this ability to add information that is not on the image is an example of going beyond OCR. Now, most invoices that are POs will be fully 100% matched. So every line item on the invoice matches the corresponding row on the PO. But let's also consider some real-world mismatch examples where Iris Extract streamlines the handling of invoices that should still be considered a match and would be a costly exception with other solutions. So there's the whole versus component example. So maybe 2 lines on the PO or only 1 line on the invoice, or 1 line on the PO or 2 lines on the invoice. Like maybe you have a $1 nut and a $2 bolt, and together they're sold for $3. Here, the quantity and unit price are different, though the subtotal or total matches. Then you have substitutions, like 2 boxes of 5 each instead of 1 box of 10, and the line item subtotal is still the same. Or many companies have a policy for acceptable variances, say within a range, such as plus or minus 3%. So that would still be a match. Partial delivery. For these, we can tailor the routing of the invoice image to a supervisor queue. Say 10 boxes were ordered, but only 5 delivered and invoiced. How does the organization handle this? Or perhaps a better question, how would they like to handle such exceptions going forward? Often when putting in an automated solution, companies take the opportunity to re-engineer existing procedures for increased efficiency. So the handling of mismatched cases can get complex, like one invoice spanning 2 or more purchase orders to the same supplier or whatever. And while Iris Extract SPAP is pre-built for accounts payable, it is important that each implementation can be customized for specific user goals and requirements. Now, the capturing of the line items and ability to do the PO matching analysis are built into Iris Extract Solution Package Accounts Payable. As a regularly scheduled background task, data from the ERP system is loaded into Iris Extract as master data to be used during processing. We identify the PO number and the incoming invoice image, and then match the unit quantity and the unit price and calculate the line total. Additional logic can be added to accommodate specific user procedures and policies. The opportunity to tailor the solution to the user is a big strength of Iris Extract. Now, I'm going to be handing off to my colleague, Mike Dici, for our live demo. Pierrick, I don't know if you want to see if there's any.
In the meantime, we got just a question maybe that is relevant now. What about invoices that arrive with attachments?
That's a great question. Yes, we do have the ability to handle emails and the attachments, and that's something that you're actually going to see in the demo. So maybe we'll go ahead and proceed to that. So here's my colleague, Mike Dici, for the demo.
Thanks, Joe. Great job there. All right. leave it. Yep. Okay, you guys see my screen. That and this. All right. So says you brought up the email. From my personal experience, and I think many people on this call, when we're dealing with an AP solution, a lot of the invoices are already coming in electronic, whether it's a customer portal or vendor portal that they're downloading from, or they're receiving them in email. And like many people on this call, we probably spend more part of our day in email than we want to. So you may get an email like this. Probably there'll be text in there, but in that email you may receive multiple attachments, multiple invoices. So here's especially for a key supplier or raw materials provider, and you may also run into a situation where you are receiving multiple invoices, but they're just one attachment, so they have to be split. And so then the next thing that usually comes up during that discovery is, yeah, it comes in an email, but then we print them out because then we can look at them one by one. And then oftentimes they're writing on the invoice, and then they're scanning it in after the fact as a single invoice. So they added a lot more manual work than necessarily needed to be done. And so in this case, I'm going to take this attachment, which we can see real quick. So it's 10 pages. I have multiple emails from the same vendor here, or multiple attachments. In this case, I want to make it simple for everyone. So I have 7 different vendors in this one attachment. This could also simulate walking up to a copier and scanning a batch of invoices that way for the ones that come in paper, but for the ones that come in email as well. So we're going to automatically separate those. So I'm just going to hit send. And then this is monitoring my Gmail. So I'm just going to tell it to sync. This is normally running in the background every 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever the logical interval of that is. And so it'll pull that down. And then we can fast forward. We'll come back and take a look at the doc separation. But for the moment, I want to take you through the power virus as it relates to this. So the screen that you see in front of you right now is called Verify. This can be a thick client, it can be a web client, so you don't have to install something on your computer. You just share a link on your intranet site. And then in this interface, this is meant to do exception handling. So the invoices that didn't pass through because they broke a business rule, or as a preventative measure, you just wanted to review it. So I'm going to try and share a lot of best practices as we go along here. And one of those best practices is taking a field, whether it's the vendor ID, the invoice number, and making that a forced validation in the beginning. So some people do it for a set period of time, but I think the most practical way of implementing it would be to have, in this case, this invoice number, which is green here on the right, set that if you haven't seen it before and you haven't cleared it by hitting a hotkey, that it'll get presented to you. So although captured in is the correct invoice number from the document, it's forcing you to validate it. But now, after I've gone through the invoice, if I'm happy, I can hit a key on that, and I won't see a peerless invoice again unless my line items don't match my purchase order, or I'm missing an invoice number, or it's a duplicate invoice number. I've already received this invoice before. So those other business rules still apply. We're just not stopping it for the sake of stopping it, if that makes sense. Okay, so further on this interface, and I'm going to make this full screen now. That's easier. On the left-hand side here, I've chosen to batch my documents together. So these 4 attachments could have all been in the same email or been one PDF. So we can group documents together, especially if we need to associate data. We can also just say if everything's great, those ones go through, and these are the only ones that are left behind. In this case, I grouped the documents together. Below that is a preview of, or sorry, it's the whole page. So you can pick where on the invoice you want to look. So you can zoom in on a section and then it applies that view in the middle here. But you can, all right, so there's a good question. I'll come back to that one on another invoice if that's okay. All right, so we can, we can jump around on the invoice here. You can also do the same thing by drawing a box here and zooming in. All right, so other things that are, so we saw invoice number, invoice date. You can see that the date is spelled out this way, so we can handle that without a problem. So we know what dates look like. We know the phrases we're expecting. We want to prioritize them, but we realize that invoices are imperfect, and sometimes you're just going to have the word date, or you're just going to have a date at the top of the document. And so there's all sorts of cascading logic we can apply, or you can train it. So you can click on the date and then hit a hotkey and train that as well. All right. We did find our purchase order on the system as well. Sorry, right here. So here's our PO. So this was found. Some customers do have multi-PO invoices. We can support that and then associate the different lines to the appropriate purchase order number as well. In this case, it was more simplistic. And then we have our value of goods and gross amount. In this case, are the same on the invoice. So we're really zoomed in there. Now, some people will do a comparison against a purchase order for the total invoice amount, but oftentimes you don't. Some of the miscellaneous charges and tax aren't factored in, so it's really down at the line item level that we're matching it up. And so if we look at the line item level, we have our quantity, unit price, and total. So those are found. And then that does line up correctly. So you can see that in our receiving table, if you're doing the three-way match, that we can compare it to that. So if this value is lower, like 45, then this would be off. Oh, I guess I don't have permission to modify the field. I'll show you another one where we have a disparity in the quantity, and so that comparison is happening on that. And then we can pull back other information from the purchase order table. So as you can see, I was maybe binge watching a little too much Back to the Future during this quarantine. So what Peer Chain calls the cross chain with end hooks, our Iris company refers to it as the flux capacitor. All right. Now we do have two lines here that are not in the PO table. And so you can see that this was a tariff charge. Sometimes there are unexpected charges. Sometimes they happen for a series of months. We know that there was a lot of tariffs in 2019 between various countries. And so how a company is going to handle that will be different, but we can accommodate that. So some will say, you know what, we have a GL code because, we're in the still industry, for example. So we're just calling it tariff 001. That's the GL code that it's assigned to. We could even potentially fill that in automatically if the description said tariff. Some people would say, you know what, we already anticipated that. We knew it was a 8% tariff. So for us, our unit price was 217 plus 1847. So I'm going to show you the menu here real quick. You could there you go. Add that current row to the previous row. And so it would take that incidental charge and then just increase the unit price and then the line total. Or, and this is very common, if you take tariffs aside, sometimes like a freight charge or a tax line will be listed as a line item. And they'll say, no, you know what, we treat that more as like a header, as an overall cost on the invoice. And so I could show you the menu again, but I'm just going to hit the hotkey, which is F2. And so that line disappears. Sorry, guys. think I hit F3 when I did that. So I'm going to bring that back. Nice thing, if you ever make a mistake, you can always reset the document results. So it's like it just went back through the system. So if I go back down to our line items, I'm going to take this into my F2. So I move that to an incidental charge, and I'm going to do the same thing with the other charge here as well. And good, I actually hit the right key this time. Now, if I go back, you'll see my, in this case, it's freight shipping, but it could be called tariffs. It's $99.55, which is actually the sum of those two items. And what's really cool, if you look here on the document, this is what someone did manually in their environment. And so our ability to capture that or do that digitally as part of the user workflow, and then still reconcile everything. This again voids that printing, manual calculation, etc. And then of course the parts are just the 1171. The invoice is still sound. There are a lot of questions, so let me, Joe, have you reviewed any of those?
Mike, we will review them.
Come back to that?
Yeah, we will come back to that. Maybe one which is very interesting, of course, and important to highlight is it template-based data extraction? I think we have a straight answer to that, right?
Correct. Yeah, it is not template-based data extraction. So if I was to remove this vendor and, well, from the table, it would still read all the same information on there, just wouldn't know the vendor ID. This oftentimes comes up in a demonstration. We all have, you know, the samples or scenarios we tend to show, but as the customer sharing with you what their scenario is, they go, hey, can you try these invoices? And when you run them through, we still find the invoice number because we look at it like a human does. So our whole extraction approach is the same way a human would look at the document. So whether it's keywords, like invoice number, PO number, invoice date, or a line item where A times B equals C or A times B minus C equals D kind of logic.
Okay,
so I think that's a good question.
Okay, and a second one maybe now. What if the invoice is related to more than one PO?
So mine's not showing that, like I don't have any multi, but we go to recognize the lines, for example, and so we'll associate at the line level the appropriate order number. Typically, if you're going to be supporting multi-PO on an invoice, you don't have PO number as a header, or you'd make it a list of them, you know, so you'd be passing multiple PO values over for that. But no, in this case, if these were two lines, sorry, one line from one PO, one line from another PO, it would show that here. You can also do a database lookup at this level. And so I may see the PO number on there. Maybe they didn't list it, but it's not part of that other one. So I go, well, which one is this for? So just show me all the lines for this vendor. In this case, I only have the two lines, but you could grab the one and fill that line in automatically that way.
Okay.
And you could always manually key one if you really had to key a line in because it wasn't PO based. I mean, I assume we'd find the line, but it just wouldn't be associated to the PO. So you can associate to the PO, you could move it to an incidental charge, that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's great. That's great. I think we will keep the other questions for the Q&A session in the end.
Sounds good. Thanks, Pierre. All right, so I'm going to tab over to my next invoice. This one is from 3M. And so we recognize this based on an address that was in the system. The more data a customer can give and the more accurate that data the customer gives, you know, that the address may not match, but the phone number might match, or an account number or a website. You may even have a situation where you may have the same vendor in there multiple times, and then as if we were to take Canon Melville, for example, for the Canon people that are on the call, they have the finance, Canon Financial, you have Canon Solutions America, you have Canon Inc., you have CIS, so you have all these companies that have the same Melville address. And so if I was doing work with multiple of those entities, it could actually present to you that you have multiple matches. So in this case, I only have one, but it would say, hey, which one is it? So if you pick the appropriate one, you could train it, or you could say, you know what, I can't just rely on address. I also want address and phone, and based on that, or address and web address, because then I would have, cis.com or, csa.canon.com from a matching perspective. The other thing we can do, and this has happened before, where we override the initial vendor selection because we found the PO number, and the PO is associated to the appropriate vendor, and we can also override the company code, the location of which entity it was, CIS, CSA, in that example, based on the order number found. All right. So if we were to look at the lines, apologize, I was previewing this to my colleagues just before this, so let me just reset that real quick. All right. So if we look at our line items, we have 6 times 21731 equals 1303. So we've matched it, but it does tell us that we differ from the quantity. So even though we received the 6, I also have a check against the order table. And so if we were to go again and look at the clear that out here real quick, just that, we can see that we ordered a quantity 3 at a higher price. And again, they split it across more units. We oftentimes see that. So either the unit of measure is different, or they split it, or they change the quantity times a different pricing unit. And again, if it adds up to the same 1303.86, we're happy, from a calculation. And then the other situation that can happen is they split it across 2 lines. So you're ordering a pair of shoes and they invoice you 1 line for left shoe, 1 line for right shoe. I know it's kind of a silly example, but that does happen a lot. Okay. Let me just toggle over to another one. So I showed you when I opened up the PDF, but I took the same invoice multiple times to show you the way you can interpret it. And so I also did not reset this one here real quick, but when this was 5, there was 2 issues with it. One is that the quantity times unit price is off, because 1273 is 6 times that dollar amount, and then also the quantity doesn't match the received. Though I believe we have, or in this, we configure it different for your situation. For this scenario, I'm making sure that they're never invoicing me for a quantity higher than I received, and that also doesn't match the PO. But you can say, hey, as long as it doesn't exceed and the line total doesn't exceed, I'm happy.
Right.
So,
Mike, maybe with the time left, we'll show the other non-PO invoice that's an exception, and then we'll have some time still for Q&A.
That's a great point. And then maybe if we need to bounce one because of the Q&A, we can. But that's a great idea. Okay. So here would be a non-PO example. We could use the order number, for example, as a PO, but in this case, I don't have line items. It's just a service charge. So, we don't need any line items because we're marking it as a utility-based company. So we don't need to have that all add up. But so we have our value of goods, our line, we have our miscellaneous charges, which again, I have just grouped into freight, but click that real quick. You'll see that there's a past due amount. You may also see this a lot when you're meeting with your clients and they provide you samples. This is not usually a cash flow issue. This is a inability to process things in a timely fashion. So, anytime catching things like that.
If you had a whole group of people who manage AP departments, billing is one of the kinds of things that show up as an exception. So it's great to be able to handle that the same we would with a standard invoice.
And I'm not sure who asked the question related to the multi-PO, but also when you deal with utility bills, you often have multi-location or multi-company codes. Because if I'm in the Chicagoland area, so if I had 8 locations within the greater Chicagoland area, they're all being serviced by ComEd and NICOR, where I'm at. So you would have that situation where I want to break out the cost for each section. And so usually on those, you're going to see like for service at, or a meter number, something to that extent, where we can then break it out and associate the cost of the different locations, automatically apply the GL code for that as well. All right. Why don't we move to questions then?
Question from a friend in Switzerland, I guess. You have all in currency, in the dollar currency. What's with different currencies as euros and Swiss?
So we can definitely handle different currencies. Not sure if I want to jump in designer, but we do currency detection in this case. If we see the dollar sign or the word dollar, then automatically associating it in US currency. But if we saw the euro symbol or the pound symbol, then so there's actually a master data table where you can give it phrases or symbols, and then say that based on this would be the appropriate currency. And we can also use that for country-specific rules. So in this case, I'm also not dealing with any VAT or national tax on these invoices. But we certainly do support that.
Okay.
Joe, is that good? Anything you want to add to that, or anything that suffices?
Yes. How were the multiple invoice splits?
So there's a package add-on for whether you're doing mailroom, AP, medical record. It doesn't matter. We just call it document separation, or package automatic document separation. And so we look at key phrases like page 1, PG1 to that extent. We can split, based on barcodes or other key phrases. I know it's not invoice specific, but like dear sir, madam, or to whom it concern. But specific to invoices, not even necessarily treating as invoice, we give it like certain keywords like PO number, invoice number. And so if that value changes from one document to the next, then we can also say split. So in that situation where you have a vendor send 10 invoices in one attachment and there is no page 1, then you can do that. I had a scenario where someone gave me 180 invoices and I didn't change any of the defaults, and there was like 20 that didn't separate. And so when I looked at it, either OCR was bad or there was no, or what was in the default page 1 list type phrasing. But then I went, oh, but the phone number is only on the first page of this invoice. So you could literally just add a phone number, account number, something to that list if it didn't work for the automatic splitting. And if it did make it through past into verify, which most likely would stop because now you have more line items, you have 2 totals, you have overlapping logic, so it would stop. You can split it there. As soon as you split it, both documents get reanalyzed in that scenario. But obviously, you don't want to have to take that extra step. You want it to go through automatically. So adding a phrase and checking the phrases on that. But yeah, there's a package for that. There's the question, is it possible to train positions? So on the line item level, can you train it? The answer is yes. So there's I'm going to pick an invoice that has line items. I apologize. So it does need to be within the left-right range, typically for finding it. So if like item number you could train, in this case I'm pulling that back from the master data table based on the position match, and it's also failover logic. But let's say that was something I wanted to capture. It would need to be within the range, but I would change the business rule to say that item number could come first, and that may already be one of the rules, but you can do it. And then it was, can it go across multiple lines? And again, it is a yes, because we're focused on the left-right constraint. The project itself is set up to say, how many lines can this data span? So actually, for those that are in the print industry, we had a customer, and the invoices, they were doing a lot of marketing work. So the invoices would be for print. So it'd have like the material, and it'd be 36 by 48 inches. And the math they used to get to your total for that poster print was like 7 or 8 lines. And so you can definitely increase the number of lines to look for the data in that situation. We also have now through Solution Designer with any kind of coding where you can say, all right, if I need this other table structure, so only for those marketing or print providers where the lines are going to be 7 pages, only they use this table layout, where I also want to know how many inches the drawing was it color, black and white, some other miscellaneous items at the table level.
A quick question, maybe somebody had asked about the versions. So I guess this is Iris Extract version 5 and SPAP 7. So I'm just...
Correct, yeah. So the base of this project was SPAP 744, which I want to say was a February release. Yeah, there's always updates coming out and always new cool features in there. So as long as you're within the 5 and you're within, the SPAP, which started 7, within there you have the ability to upgrade your older SPAP project.
Okay, Mike, there is a second part of that question about training position. Is it possible to read discounts and surcharges on positions and train them if necessary?
Yes, you can. So what you see on the screen here, and I know there's a lot of data there. In fact, I just added these 3 this morning and didn't put a constraint on it to only be for the credit card. But there's a lot of innate fields. I disabled a lot so that because they weren't applicable to this demo, but I didn't want to overwhelm, but certainly all that logic's in there. You can have, I think there's up to 6 miscellaneous charges, 3 taxes, 3 tax rates. I mean, all these fields can be enabled if needed. But in this case, I restricted the amount. But here, this is like discount amount, but there's a discount rate one. So, yeah, you can certainly have all those at the line item level. If they are enabled fields, then you could train it. So, maybe I'll pull that up to show you. You have available options. You say, if I'm going to do line items, this is what can constitute a line. So you're saying, okay, if I do have, I'm going to look for quantity, unit price, total. But if that doesn't make mathematical sense, then check for quantity, unit price, discount, total or surcharge. You know, we had ones where you had like a deposit, like on a keg. You know, I think it was an interesting example of one. So you're either getting credits from things that you'd returned, or but yes, you can enable different fields. There's a lot of options, and then you can say what order they could be in. And so sometimes, if you run something through and it doesn't work, you can check why that is. So, all right.
Okay.
Why that opens there. How does duplicate invoice number recognition work? All right, that's a good question. So obviously you need a data source of that. So, you know, we could archive invoice numbers that we've seen to a table, and then future invoices can check that. But most likely you'd either have a master data file or a database lookup from the ERP, or if you're leveraging a document management system, we could do a check against that data source. A challenge, what I would recommend is checking it as it's analyzed. Hey, have I seen this invoice number before? But also checking out an export, because if something comes through, let's do worst case scenario, the invoice number wasn't found, so it's stuck in verify, and someone doesn't look at it for 2 days, and so the driver that dropped off the product handed an invoice, and then later that day or the next day you got an email with that same invoice, right? So it's duplicate invoice, 100% duplicate. So if they're both in verify at the same time, they don't know that each other exist. But if I go through one, I process it out, great. On the next one, if I don't refresh the value, I go to export that out. We could do a check at that point to go, hey, everything matches up, the same invoice, same invoice amount. This is truly a duplicate. And then usually in that scenario, we could kick it back to the supervisor within Iris Extract, or if you have a DM system, we send it there and say, hey, you have this duplicate invoice. You know, what do you want to do with this? Archive, delete, you know, at that point. And I would say that duplicate invoice check, you would want to do it on more than just the invoice number. You probably want to compare it to the total amount of the invoice, because you may request a corrected invoice based on the fact that you didn't receive something, they charge you tax and they're not supposed to because you're reselling the product. Whatever the rule is that would have caused you to ask your vendor for a duplicate or for a corrected or amended invoice. Hopefully that was an answer to that.
Yes, indeed, Mike, Joe, it was very interesting. Thank you very much, guys. We have still some more questions, but we will answer them personally. We will contact you who have asked some questions that have not been answered yet. Joe, if you can just move to the last slide.
Okay.
The presentation, right? So I would like to thank every one of you who have participated in this webinar. One of the questions that we didn't answer is about integrations into ERPs. That gives me the opportunity to invite you to our next webinar, which is scheduled on the 3rd of June, and that will be about Iris Connect. And all the intelligent links that we have between our Iris products, Iris solutions, and backend system business applications, third-party business applications. So that will be on the 3rd of June, and you can register via our website. And also we will send you an invitation, an emailing. We have, as I said at the beginning, the recording of this session will be available tomorrow on our website. We have our website is irisdatacapture.com/webinar. On that page, you can find the upcoming webinars, but also all the information about past webinars. So you can rewatch, replay the recording. You can download the PDFs. We also put some white papers there or brochures if it's relevant, etc. So don't hesitate to visit that page. And also, of course, if you have more questions about AP automation PO matching and everything related to that topic, please consult our website, get in contact with us, and also with your BDMs. They will be more than happy to answer all your questions. So with that, I would like to thank you, Joe and Mike, for that session. That was great. And I would like to thank you all for your participation. Thank you. See you next time.
Okay.